Hi, my name is Benedict for Higher Hertz. This is number 3 in the collection of videos about saturation. Again, really pointing out that we're looking at saturation, that almost indefinable moment that you get when you plug into mythical analog gear. And the mythical piece of analog gear that I am using for this is the concept of when you jack into a Neve desk, the mythical Neve desk, and I'm not saying that Neves don't exist, but this is the idea that's behind this whole thing, that you suddenly get this extra that happens. And, well, these devices do deliver that in one form or another, and when it's right, it's wonderful. But we must make sure that we never go into distortion, because while distortion can be useful, when we start putting too much distortion in or on our mix, we actually make it, well, becomes less of everything. What we're looking at this time is Klanghelm's IVGI. If it's got another pronunciation, I'm not aware of it. And again, we'll do a quick look. This is using the default settings across that same mix. Now, if you've been watching these so far, we've looked at the soft tube knob and Voxengo's tube amp, which is not entirely designed for this, but does a great job in a particular sense. IVGI, as it comes in and out, it has a different feel, and that's part of why I chose this. So rather than saying we've got the same flavor across everything, I thought let's show a different flavor. I will be honest and say I've never managed to get this one to an album release. There is a flavor in this that I like in certain situations, but across a mix at least, I don't dig it. That doesn't make it wrong, it's just if you notice my sort of seeming to be a little less than, it's because it's not the way that I would choose to go. But at times it is really good. If you go back to the intro video and you see I did a comparison quickly between all three of them on the same instrument, IVGI actually added a really nice warmth and body. And that's what IVGI does really, really well. If you're looking to try to thicken your mix, then IVGI delivers that very quickly. My only concern is that often that thickening just ends up delivering a mix that, well, I wouldn't put out because it just feels kludgy. So I think we've got to go very carefully how we go with it. But nonetheless, there's a lot to learn, a lot to gain from this. And if, like me, you decide that it's not going to be your front line of saturation-ism, then there may be situations where you choose to use it as an effect rather than saturation in the way that we are defining it. Klanghelm are a little bit of an outsider in the VST world, and that's always attracted me to them. You know, they're kind of like the Willie Nelson, the highwaymen of VST developers. They sit out on the side, they create an interesting little suite of products that are well respected, yet somehow are never taken as seriously as perhaps they could or should be by sort of the big things, you know, the bigs. IVGI is a cut down, and I do always have some frustration in the sense that their products are really cheap. They're 23 euros, about 30 something US dollars, so it's very cheap for the product. But you can't try the full product. You can only try IVGI. Now, IVGI is a cut down of the desk mode in this product. The full product has a tube, a digital, and a fuzz. I kind of get the feeling that they might be interesting and that I might find something that I dig a little bit more in there, but I can't try them. And that's sort of an eternal frustration. I'm left trying something which I think is nicely made, but not super well suited. Yeah, I guess I could go, oh, well, I'll just take the plunge and buy it anyway and leave it sitting around in case I like it, but I'm not that kind of guy. When I invest in a tool, I want it to be my everything. I'm not a big fan of investing a tool because I might use it once. I want it to be my everything. Maybe this would be my everything, but I got no way of knowing. But nonetheless, they do provide very interesting products with a lot of at least paper functionality for really good pricing, and they stay outside of that usual suspects thing. That's not to say that they don't commonly appear in forums with people going, yeah. But I can't say how yeah I'd be because I can't try the product. It's just one of those real annoyances. But what we're looking at is the cut down or the demo version of their fuller SDRR, and it's called IVGI. Features. As we said, it's a cut down. It's to emulate a desk. I'm not sure what, if any, particular desk is designed to emulate. I really don't care. It's brown, kind of giving a sort of 70s sort of feel. So maybe it is supposed to be navy, who knows? And again, I don't much care. Working from the top down, we have different modes for our meters to work in. Now, this is, I think, a weakness of the product, but there's also a kind of a strength in here as well. Let's get this running again. We can look at signal as it's coming in. We can look at signal as it's going out. And then, this is where it's clever, we can look at a meter that tells us the difference between the in and out. Because one of the things with saturation is that it's a kind of drive, so it's likely to add gain. So what we can do is look at the difference and then use our knob to adjust this. Now this is built on a VU sort of timing, so it's slow. So you see if I move the knob a little too quickly, it does nothing and then moves. So you just got to learn. Now in theory, the level coming into this process and the level going out should be the same. But we can see they're not. Its sense of adjust has gone off. And that's one of my frustrations. That's okay as such as it sits, but we'll then see we've got a trim knob. Now they say for this plugin to work the best, you want this to be hovering around the 0 mark. So we'll get rid of the output adjust, pop this in play. Oh no, we're way over, so we pull this back. And it's hard to say where that should be because it goes above and it stays very low below. But if I go, okay, that's probably where I think it should be. Look at my in out. Put it back here. Now look, my levels are broken. In the sense that if I do a real bypass, because I can't bypass in the plugin, it sounds better with it off than it does with it on, if for no other reason than the fact that it is louder. I think that this in-out comparison thing is super cool. But the problem is to get the sense of trim that they appear to indicate, and I don't think they explain this as well as they should, then you end up with a problem when you bypass the whole plugin. When I looked at Molot, I think it was, that had a very nice system in which you could A-B within itself, and it would give you an even level. The A-B here wasn't necessarily even, but within itself it was, so it allowed you to make unemotional decisions. If this had a bypass feature that maintained the decisions that you had made between here and here, that problem would go away, but it doesn't. So there are some cool things about what they've done, and then the wheels kind of fall off when we get back into the real world, because assuming that the DAW is going to handle your bypass for you is not the wisest of thinking. Maybe this just indicates that their DAW is one that does have a bypass button, And certain people would be like, well, why doesn't Reason have... Because a plugin should actually have its own bypass button. The fact that manufacturers have decided to avoid having them is I don't quite know what kind of decision. A little bit of an annoyance. We'll now move to our sine wave. There we go. We'll open up this one because that's the sine wave thing, and we will drag in our visualator. So here's my sine wave. The plugin is in. I'm not seeing anything, but not seeing anything is not necessarily a terrible thing. And then here we start to see it. They rise. And hear how, especially if you were listening to the last couple of programs, watching the last couple of programs, this is a much warmer kind of distortion. You don't get that bright fuzz type tone until you get right up the top. See, it's not putting partials all the way up to here. It's not making the same spread of overtones, which is why this seems so much warmer. Also, look that it's turning down the level here. There is a fair amount of compression. Look at this. If we look at our AB, there's a fair amount of crush that's going on here. So the plugin is also providing a fair amount of compression. Now, they're very open about that in their manual, so there is no complaint per se with that, because that is part of the saturation into distortion sort of thing. If we were to up our input levels, and it might crackle as it does that because it's got to try to work out what's going on. If we put that right on 0, we see that our overtones appear pretty fast. Again, just ignore those lumps, that's just digital coping. And it does get a little bit brighter because we've just got more distortion. We can then change the asymmetry of this. Now, this is different from, kind of backwards from, your typical tube type drive. So just be careful. Normally you would start here going, okay, well that's the tame one, and this is the ripping one. And to some extent it sort of seems to work that way. But watch our levels. See how it falls. And now it rises. And these overtones actually clarify. So in other words, they're thicker here and a bit thinner here. So the tone that you're adding actually tends to get brighter and clearer as you go across here, and warmer and more modified as you go here. They default to somewhere in the middle. And then there's a response curve, which changes the overall feel of what's happening. That's again, while you think it's going to be a straight kind of a tone knob, it's a bit more complex than that. And they explain it, but experientially I struggle to get my head around exactly what it's doing. It does add bass bump when you go to the extreme, and it does add a high frequency bump as you go to the extreme. As you go to the extreme on this side, it does say, and definitely seems to, reduce some of these brighter overtones and rely more on an EQ curve than its overtones. But at somewhere around here, you're still getting a fair amount of those overtones, as well as, I don't know where, at what point the EQ boost begins, but you can tell a lot of what they're trying to do is thicken in the belly. And the plugin definitely achieves that. Don't get me wrong, but while this sounds like it's going to be brighter, as soon as I put material into it, I feel like it just gets thicker rather than clearer, cheerier. So that's simply the way it works. There is a relaxed button, which changes things and sometimes quite noticeably so, but it doesn't seem then to respond quite the same to the knobs. It just says it's a more relaxed mode, but it doesn't explain what that is. That frustrates me. I like to know what I'm doing, because the more I understand what the plugin is doing, the less magical it is, the more I can actually control and say, if I do this, then I'm getting more of that. This whole idea of, oh, just use your ears, it's all very hipster, but it's not the best way of actually learning and getting a spreadsheet of material in your head that goes, well, when I'm here, this is what I am doing. So the manual, while okay, better than the Voxengo one, is still not as helpful as it wants to be. I kind of always sneakily think that the manufacturers are relying on A, an unwillingness to explain, and B, a desire to appear magical. Because if they were more open, they're perhaps worried that somebody else is going to steal their secret sauce. Well, you know what? Secret sauces really aren't that secret. Yeah, sure, with Hertz delay, I just fudged by saying that the modulation for some of the later delay paths was secret sauce. But it's not because it's secret, it's just because there's no point taking the time and energy to explain it. It is just a little less than linear. So back to here. Interesting device that is capable of delivering a certain kind of outcome. You just have to really get your head around how it's going to work for you. Oh, the last knob, I almost forgot. Crosstalk. This one is interesting. You don't see this too often. With crosstalk off, then your two signals come in and they behave independently from each other. If it were 100%, and this doesn't offer 100%, but if it were 100%, your signal would come in, would be summed to mono and processed. You probably don't want that. Crosstalk means that some of what comes in here is heard here, and vice versa. So each side starts to hear what's going on. It's, if I remember correctly, on its default setting at about minus 90 dB. That means you're not hearing any crossover at all, and I think it goes to about 60 dB. Minus 60 dB is sort of a quiet room. So in terms of hearing any difference, no. But perceptually, you may feel that the mix changes its behavior slightly. I didn't get into it, but it's an interesting idea, if nothing else. So that's the device in terms of its knobs and buttons, its features. Let's run through the good and bad. What's good is that it does have a really warm sound. There are lots of plugins out there that have said we're warmifying, and quite honestly, they don't make your sound seem to feel thicker, tubbier in the tummy. So in that sense, as a warmer, this definitely does that. It tubifies. And in the right situations, I think that can be great. My concern with that, even though I haven't put this as a bad, is that, well, personally, I just don't want my mixes to be tubified. I want them to feel open and clear and expansive. But I guess if I were delivered something that was just thin and I didn't have the ability any other way to add body back into those sounds, then maybe IVGI would be a good solution for that. Definitely if you got a digitally typed sound, let's say that electric piano, we'll look at that when we get there, and you want to make it feel a little bit more 70s boss gags and all of that, then IVGI might well be a really good thing to reach for if you're not looking to have more eek on the top and just wanting to in the low mids, then this is probably going to be your winner. It does have an okay manual, we've discussed that already, and it is free. You really shouldn't bitch too much about things that are free that do fundamentally do what they say they're going to do. It's bad, as we said, there's no bypass on board. With its ability to balance its levels and what have you, no bypass on board just seems like a massive oversight, because you then suddenly can't do the reasons for those things being there in the first place. The levels and the metering they are confusing. To be honest, I don't know what the levels should be on the way in. And that's not because I'm stupid, that's because the plugin's not helping me to know how to do that, and the manual was just a little vague about it, which means either they don't know, or they're assuming that everybody just magically knows all these things. And while not really a negative, the first couple that we have looked at in this series have been relatively set and forget. I definitely came to a set and forget approach with regards to tube amp. This one, you'll see as we go through, that you're going to find yourself either going, oh, its default is excellent, or kind of fiddling a little bit more to try to get the result that, well, at least I'm looking for. Now, this is the part of the program I think that is the more interesting, even though it's not as fun on the surface. But mixing, if you think mixing is fun, no, it's not. So we'll start again with our mix and turn everything off. Oop, better get rid of the reverb. Now you probably notice straight away the mix just feels like it expands and opens up and starts to become airier. If you're one of those people who wants all music to be kind of, then that's probably a bad thing for you. I like music to feel open and expansive. Does that mean that this is bad product? No, it's just we've got to be aware that that's the feel that this device majors in. Let's look with our drums. Input. Now in theory they say we're supposed to be somewhere here. Now I don't know what they say is acceptable as overs. Normally if it's tape then you can go up to about +3 before you start to have issues. I don't know. So I'm going to default to leave everything on the input trim as 0. Because Reason by default runs at about -12. Nothing wrong with that. That's a good sensible level, and quite honestly the drive knob should compensate for any level issues here. If we were running in like this, then it would be hard for the drive knob to compensate because it doesn't have a negative territory. So I'm going to say for the moment, because it's not clear, because it's not been helpful, and it doesn't seem to make any difference and it makes bypassing harder, then I'm going to leave it off. But it does mean I can use this and still have it work nicely. Now let's drive. Subtle, but hopefully you can feel that there's that belly that appears in the low mids and the drums. If you're looking for that, brilliant. If not, we'd have to adjust. As I raise the drive, it does get to the point where now it's distorting. I'm just hearing in the headphones. Won't hear it as much in speakers, but it's there. That obviously is ruined. But there's a point somewhere around here where it feels like it's adding a little bit of something. Sparkle, we might say. Let's even that off. Even though, as I raise that, I feel like I'm starting to hear a kind of a brightness. Maybe I've not gone far enough. It doesn't pass the A/B test. So I think that maybe what I'm hearing is just extra clarity from it being louder. Loudness effect. I don't know, you're going to have to work that one out yourself, but then it goes into distortion. So if we say, yep, fair enough, now let's look at our asymmetry. Now it does feel a lot airier here. Straight away, it feels airier. but it's very minor on the AB, really minor. If we flip to here, that just feels to me like the thing that I wanted to get away from with analog gear. Is not as bad as a Porter Studio, curse you Fostex X26, but to me it's just providing that kind of that I wanted to get away from. Now again, if you're looking to roll off all those highs because for some reason you don't want them, then this is going to do that super nicely. But I must say, I prefer this. Still goes into distortion. And I actually prefer it with the drive down, because as we go up here, it is starting to do the signal, which is fair enough. That's what it's meant to do. Maybe my input signal's too hot, maybe my input signal's not hot enough, but you know what? I'm getting more of the result that I would hope for here. So, if I had built this, if I were emperor of the world, I would probably put that as the starting point, and the other one as a, yeah, if you want to ruin it kind of option. Personal choice, very much. If you don't like my passing a judgment, then why are you looking at a review which is about somebody passing their judgment? Output, let's just get that. This seems a lot twitchier, probably because there's less of that compression thing that it's doing. That's all right. Again, at least in headphones, I'm not hearing any particular difference. Now, with particularly the tube amp, I could hear a massive difference, too much of a difference in my headphones compared to my speakers. I trust my speakers, I don't trust these things. But I could hear a huge difference. Apart from when we're doing the thing, I don't hear a lot of difference in this fella. Now, last knob. We can add more on one side or more brightness on the other. I can hear a little bit of brightness coming in here. We've messed up our levels again, and it's nice to know that. I'm not hearing a difference. Once I get those levels right on the AB, okay, there's less brightness now. Even if it was just a straight EQ, there were no secret source inside, when I level match, in theory, I should still have some sort of perceptual sense of difference. I gotta say, I'm a little surprised. I was doing all my setup for this using speakers because, as I say, I trust them. And now in these things, I feel like I'm not hearing anything at all, which is odd. I am genuinely confused. I can hear a difference as I move these things from one side to another. They do match what they indicate. Oomphier. Less oomphy. But while less oomphy, doesn't feel like it's introducing fairy dust. So confused. Let's put this over to the other side. Yeah, I can hear it lighten up a little. The relaxed, I hear a difference, but again, with no sense of understanding how that's supposed to be different other than just being told it's different. I don't know what to do, and I'm sorry. I had a pretty fair feeling of what this was doing, and now it just doesn't seem to be doing it at all. The plugin is working. I can hear the processes, but the more scrupulous I am about the in-out levels, the less I feel like we're really adding anything, at which point I would be going, yeah, killer, let's move on. In which case, I'm going to say, okay, well, that's drums, we'll let it hit a little harder. I don't love the crushy thing that it does, but let's let it have a bit of that, because it is drums, and drums do benefit from a little bit of embiggination, and let's let it sit there. Actually, let's test, do they sound better in the mix? Yes, they do sound more whoomp. There's that. I don't want to use the word because it seems really negative, but there's that kind of mud that they bring in. It's not what I would be hoping for, but again, if you're looking to add that kind of 70s body of nasty cassette, oh yeah, it's definitely doing that, so can't complain. Let's listen to our bass. This is low frequency, and this seems to love low frequency, so let's see where we get here. I mean, interesting as drive. But remember, I don't want this blunted. Part of what I'm looking for is to try to feel like we've got this airy, jazzy sort of feel. I don't mind if it ends up, because this is a warmer thing, giving a darker club feel, but I've got to want to like it as well. Or at least say, yeah, I respect what that's doing. I'm confused by what it's doing, and that I didn't anticipate. Let's move forward. Again, I don't mind doing some of that. It is getting a fairly nice kind of bounce, I think. But we better watch our levels. Okay, this is actually working nicely. This is probably the kind of thought that they're anticipating. One of the issues with a lot of plugin developers, and that's fair enough, in a sense, although I think they should be more clear about it, is that they have a certain sound they want, just as I have a certain sound that I want. But if they've designed this that it's going to be great on a particular type of sound, they probably should give some sort of suggestion of that, because it's working nicely here. It is adding that fatness to the drums, and it is adding, again, some of the fatness and a nice bounce to this, so I'm happy with that. I don't think that works so well. I think where they are is probably fine. Again, it feels like a certain frequency has gotten a little boost. It's like there's a tire going around the belly. Let's listen to the pair of them. Yeah, you can hear that. There's a particular frequency that's just like got a bell. It's like they've been put in a bus and had a bell popped on them. Fair enough. It's giving a certain feel. Straight. Yeah, and they do have that kind of thing. In that sense, I respect it. It's not necessarily what I want, but I do respect it. So it is working, despite my confusion. Let's have a look at our electrical piano. Again, where it wants to go is in putting belly into it. It doesn't really seem to want to work on the tops much at all. So it's adding its presence in the mids rather than up here. And a lot of analog gear did do that. It's probably fair a bit cleaner now, but a lot of less than top analog gear that did that. And to be perfectly honest, chances are our Neve, not the mythical one, but the real Neve, chances are it did that too, because tape did that, because everything did that. That was just the nature of the times, nature of the beast. We listened to Rod Stewart's Night on the Town, and it is significantly warmer and narrower in frequency range than, say, Culture Club. That adds roughly 10 years in between, and the state of the technology has clearly changed quite a lot. Culture Club's bright and clear and super clean. The best of Culture Club doesn't really have much in the bottom end, I gotta say. I don't know how that happened. But the reality is there's sonically a big difference between those two records. Both beautiful records, but just they do have that difference in sonic footprint. If you listen to something like Judas Priest's Sin After Sin, the thing is very warm. And that's where this thing seems to want to go. It's built its mythical idea of what our Neve is going to sound like, and it's warm. It's not adding any fairy dust on top. It's kind of putting, I don't know, friendly goblin gobbets in the middle. It has to alliterate. And that's interesting in its own way. My concern as we move forward is that because it seems to add everything in the same spot, that we might end up with some issues with this. But nonetheless, I complained about metering and levels, particularly levels. That brings us to gain staging. People go on and on about gain staging, and quite honestly, a lot of what they talk about is unnecessary and silly, but let's look at it. Gain staging, and they often add a number of minus 18 dB to it. Fair enough, it's good to have a target. Reason, as I say, works on a target of minus 12 dB. Then, this is roughly what happens. If we take IVGI out of the process, if we were to get to, actually no, sorry, I set this up so that if we were to get to the numbers that it wants, I need to add 6 dB to have this hovering around the 0. But the problem with pushing 6 dB is that we're now pushing 6 dB. This is very comfortable that we're level matched, fine, but we're now 6 dB louder on the out. So the obsessive idea of gain staging, and there is a certain sense in it, is that we adjust our level on the way in so that we get the perfect level on the way in, and there's no such thing as this. Each device will behave differently based on what you throw at it and how you throw at it. And that's part of your job to learn. If you just go, well, if I set everything to minus 18 dB, I'll always be right. You'll always be wrong. Or, except for 12 o'clock, it's always 12 o'clock twice a day. But that's just a happy accident and doesn't work. So the idea is that we come into our plugin at this idealized level, and then we reset our idealized level as we come out to go to the next plugin at the idealized level. All I can say to that really is you need to be aware of what you're doing. That's part of being a mix engineer. You need to be aware, does this device like to have more level thrown at it? Or does it give me the result that I'm looking for in this instance when I throw less level at it? If you don't know that about your devices, you should not be using them. If you cannot hear this, you should not be using those devices. Mix simply. Once you get to the point where you can start to comprehend and go, oh, I get that now, then you can start to use it. You see, I got lost there and started to struggle with this device because I was struggling to hear what I wanted to hear from it, which is why I tend to not use it. Once I again connect with, well, this is what it does do, then that becomes the point where if I am playing with something, let's say I've got an electric piano and going, oh, it's just too thin and DX70 and, that's not what I want, then I might go, you know what, that IVGI just, it does that. In which case I bring it in and look at, well, how do I get what I'm looking for? The point where it's starting to burr, great. We've rounded off some of that high end, but we've done it in a way which is a little different from EQ, in which case I'm going to go great. In the process of making sure that I've got it right, there will be a sense of A being, yes, am I winning? Yes, I'm winning. The mix is happier with it this way. If I've grown in level, what does it matter? It really doesn't. If I've grown like 300 dB, yeah, there's a serious problem because I'm hitting my fader. And now my mix has to be like minus 60 dB before I feel like it can balance. That's just stupid. That's not gain staging, that's just stupid. In which case, yes, you would be looking at rolling some off here before you throw all of that down the chain. But when you come to having a next plugin, assuming there is a next plugin, assuming there even needs to be a next plugin. I watched a video where a guy was, I'm so pro, and he's got like 18 different effects on top of this vocal that, well, it was squished to buggery. The fact that it was released, yeah, whatever, good on him. Really, good on him. But it was giving people the impression that if they can add like 78 effects, then they become pro. No. So I only need to worry about what the next device is going to get when the next device gets it. If it is, as I say, the fader just getting too much level to be useful, then I've got to deal with it. If the next plugin is level agnostic, it doesn't matter. In the digital domain, most things are level agnostic. If you are running in 64-bit, you can't reach the ceiling. You can probably take all my plugins and turn them all up to 11 and still not reach the ceiling. In which case, it's a moot point. If it is a device that's going to be affected by level, let's say for some bizarre reason you were going to put a distortion after this, then if you want that distortion to work on its softer end, yes, if you are sending out plus 74 dB, we got a problem with being easy on our distortion, in which case you might want to pull that back. But I'm going to pull that back here, or if necessary, inserting some sort of gain device, I'm going to pull that back to suit the nature of the plugin that I'm putting next, not to some kind of rule. So, gain staging, over and out. My concern is, while that sounds nice enough in solo, is that it just feels too munted here as far as I'm concerned. I want that to be bright and cheery. I'm not getting a feel like I think suits the mix and the material, because the material is what matters, with that kind of effect. So I'm going to go to the position where I feel like, oh yeah, well at least that gives me some kind of lightness, brightness, airiness. And we will move forward. String. Again, it can potentially be a kind of a cool distortion, broken distortion sort of effect. Its compression is adding an evenness and a sort of authority to it. So I get that, but I would need to add a whole pile of EQ to that to resolve the problem that I've made. Now this mix does not have an EQ available to it. I'm doing the whole mix based on what my saturation device can bring me, and it can't bring me what I want. I don't think I'm going to get what I want from this. It's interesting to do the thing. And let's have a listen in context. Okay, in the mix, I don't have as much of a problem as I'm feeling like I have in solo, and you should always mix in the mix. It's changed the tone, but it does have the feeling of sitting a little bit more confidently, a little bit more assuredly, and a little bit more in its place. And that's the whole idea with this string. It needs to sit in its place. It's not a lead instrument. We've got the electric piano for that. So we'll say fair enough. Let's run through our mix. The mix is punchier in a certain way, but it's not in the way that I would hope. Does that make this wrong? No, many of you listening to it might be going, in which case it's the device for you. Let's look at what we're going to get with our reverb. Yeah, I can just hear a great big level burst. I can feel the difference, but again, rather than feeling expansive and lighter, brighter, it just kind of gets this kind of crushed feel as far as I'm concerned. Now, crushed is not a fair word. I understand that, but trapped is probably a better word. It's, I guess, like putting Harry Potter in the cupboard, you know, it just doesn't feel like what I'm looking for. I guess if you're chasing that lo-fi sound where everything sounds trapped and poor quality, then this is probably brilliant. And it is making that reverb thicker. Which would worry me that it's going to glug the mix. It's definitely again bringing out that particular set of frequencies that it does in the mids. Let's pop it back in there. No reverb. Reverb. Process reverb. What I feel like is as soon as I bring that in is that again I'm just being hit by that particular frequency range just being like, so it's well it's a little bit like just adding a ring round here or being hit in the belly with a baseball bat. It's a narrowish sort of thing, and it's just in that point. And while I understand that in solo, in a sense, it changes that sound for the embiggination, do I like it across the whole mix? No, but I don't have to like it. I merely have to understand and explain it. It is making that thicker. So again, if you're looking for something that's going to make a sound that feels like it's a bit too thin and you haven't got a better way of doing it, then IVGI definitely seems to do that straight away, but just watch that you aren't just adding a spare tire into your mix that you'll then struggle to get rid of later. So, mix with our reverb, which means that we now move forward to the master. Let's bring it in. Big level gain. Why plugins have a big level gain on their default, I really don't comprehend. I know why it would be good marketing for them. You turn it on and it's like, it just got bigger, just got louder. So if you know that that's going to be the case, why don't you just turn the level down a little bit or something, I don't know. Again, I feel like the mix becomes less. I have to increase the level to get what I feel like the mix has lost. I'm not sure that that's what I'm looking for. When we go there, we've definitely got with the kick and the bass, because that bass has got that great big whoom, whoom, and that definitely comes out. So full marks for its ability to take something and make the bottom end become really big and bouncy. And many of you could be like, but that's the whole point of rock and roll. Yeah. Until you get to the point where your mix is just big and bouncy and it has nothing on top and no reason for anyone to remember it. Remember, go back, listen to bands like Slade, The Sweet, and their mixes did not sound like this. They were actually quite limited on the bottom end so that there was all this clarity up top. Their kick drums were really bright, but at the same time, not too much brightness on the top because we needed to really connect with the wig wham bam or ballroom blitz. It's the ballroom blitz. Just stunning song. I don't know where that came from, but absolutely amazing. But those mixes were not the thing that people obsess over these days. But this is an interesting result and what it majors in, as far as I'm concerned. Let's open up our Asymmetry. It's still bringing that. I worry I may be hearing a little bit of overdrive in here. Which means pulling this back. And I've got no way to up the output without messing up my thing here, so I will ignore their meter. Just use mine. Just feels compressed. And if we were using this instead of a mix compressor, okay, that's fine. But at no point do I feel like I'm getting that extra little magic and sparkle and presence and 3D space around things, which is what I'm always looking for in this sort of thing. So if it came to it, and as it has, if I were to put this against just the tube amp, then I would use the tube amp very, very carefully, watching my input levels, because it is prone to driving, especially in a live mix situation, one not as controlled as this. Then I would be using that because of its brightness, its feeling of adding this space and 3D-ness, especially around the high end of the mix. If I had an instrument in there that I felt like, oh, this is too, then I would possibly say, oh, okay, we'll put IVGI on that, but as an effect. So I would probably put this in on the front and then put the tube amp as my actual saturator. So I would be Electric Piano, IVGI, any effects that it's got, and then the tube amp, of the pair of them. Because while it does do something and do it rather consistently and well, it's bringing a boom, boom, and a kind of a nice sort of rolling punch to the mix. It's not adding any stuff in the air. And before you say go get fresh air or whatever, I declined to review that because it just went from not doing anything straight into being harsh. I put it in mixes, I put it in commercial mixes, and it never made it to the end. It always got pulled out as being harsh. It wasn't just me, had clients sitting with me, and we're going through A-Bing, and initially he's like, oh yeah, that adds, and it does add a lot. But then as we progressed with the mix, it was like, why does that thing sound harsh? Oh. Turn it off, use another process, we end up with a nicer result. So I feel like if I use this, I would still be needing to use something else to resolve the difficulties. Let's try relaxed. I feel like by relaxed it means lazier and poorer quality. The assumption is, and it's not an unfair assumption in reality, if the assumption is that analog gear, days of yours, sounded terrible, and I will back you in that, as having been there, lived through it, then yes, relaxed it's a little too groovy, man. But it's not what I'm looking for. Again, that comes down to what you're looking for. It's adding real body and warmth, but no up here. It talks about handling the up there, but I think it's far more focused on just warmer, 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 and then adding this bump in the mids to low mids, which is good in certain situations. I think you need to use extreme care across a whole mix or across the whole mix, as in the masters, because while you may get a sound you're looking for, you may well also get a mix that just feels kludged. You have to decide. I would not go with this myself, but I do respect what it does do, and I also rather respect its honesty towards what the days of analog really did sound like in the case of anybody who wasn't at Abbey Road or at Nassau or something like that, that generally it sounded less than what you put into it. Yes, it does add a tendency, and this is a nice thing about this, a tendency towards making low-end punch and what have you, and if that's what you're looking for, it's going to be super great for that. But outside of that, it suffers from the problems of analog gear that was anything other than the most perfect and I bet if I grabbed a Neve that was in reasonable condition, recorded off onto a decent tape deck, an Atari or whatever, Otari, not Atari, and A-B'd that against the same thing in a DAW, Reason, say, we would find that Reason would be significantly brighter and clearer, and then it's probably going off to EQing and mastering and what have you that's given us some of the brightness back. Right or wrong, it's going to come down to personal preference. I'm struggling with this because it doesn't meet my personal preference, but again, I respect that it does deliver on what it says it's going to do, so long as you understand that what it says it's going to do is in that kind of warming and adding a lower end punch at the expense of what's going on in the top of your mix. Now, as an interesting side, I'm going to ask what happens if we do approach the top of our mix. This has been there all along. What if we just take this? That's probably a little too low. Actually, I prefer not to do it that way. Feels a little hard. I would never make these decisions in headphones. I don't even know how to make them in headphones, to be perfectly blunt. Probably should just be turning this one off because our bass is affected too. Yeah, but the problem I've got is that I do feel like I need to be using a pretty big sort of a boost, pretty low down, to get back what I've lost. I feel like, and maybe because I've gone too hard here, I feel like I'm just adding brittleness, which is an EQ brittleness, rather than sparkle. So I feel like I'm going back to where I was in the 80s and early 90s, where I was trying to recover what I'd lost. You know, put what I think, yeah, that's a nice sound, put that in, it comes back and I go, is that what I get? And then would try and recover it later. It's a plugin that I think does exactly what it's designed to do, but just understand that it's a very different flavor from the other saturation devices that we've put here, that I've put here. They were all raised as contenders, and I did deliberately choose this, as I said at the beginning, as being a warmer, darker flavor, but I would urge some caution to understand its nature before applying it on everything. Otherwise, keep it aside for those situations where you've got something and you feel like, you know, I think that just is too thin around the bottom, doesn't have much weight. A cheapy Rompler or something like that, that might be helped by this, because they can have so much emphasis up here and lose some down here. So if you can add some here and manage that a little bit more, you might find that works in your favor. But go carefully. Just hearing the oomph that it brings and going, yeah, I want more and more of that, might well lead you to somewhere you think is great until you go away and listen to it, or it comes up for other people to listen to, and then suddenly you go, why does my mix sound kind of rather than, because that's honestly the result that I've gotten with this, where I've put it on mixes and gotten excited, gone, listened to it in the lounge room after watching television to go, well, how's my day's work gone? And check it again a couple of days later and still sort of like, that's not a Benedict mix at all. I'm not comfortable with that. What did I do wrong? Come back and oh. And this is not the only device that I will have that with. I try different methods, different devices, different things. This is just what everyone does. Yeah, Andrew Shep's talking about that. I don't have a stable template. It's constantly moving things around. As I say, what if I do this? How do I try that? Then there are some things that just don't last past a mix, because while they seem exciting as you're doing it and you think, oh, I'm different, and then you come back and listen to them and you sort of go, that's not what I do. It might work for someone else, but it's not what I do. So let Bob Rock do it. Benedict does not. If you have any questions about this has been an interesting one, and interesting ways that I didn't necessarily perceive it was going to feel that way once I got into cans. But any questions about the saturation thing and about the differences of flavor, because that's the interesting thing that I take out of this, is a massive difference in flavor, then hit subscribe and ask on down below. In the meantime, try this out on your own work, try this out on your own mixes. There's nothing to lose but a little bit of time, but out of that time, if you're being smart, you're learning something. And make sure you have a good time and a great day.